The first thing we need to know when we're looking at perpetuities is understand what a perpetuity actually is. Hopefully, during your research for universities, you've all seen all the options of scholarships that are there for you. A scholarship is where you are going to be given some money to go through university. There are scholarships for many different things and offered by many different people. Now what you might be thinking is, doesn't the money eventually run out? Where does the money come from? And actually in a perpetuity, the point is that money doesn't run out. It's a little bit like when you hear someone who's won or inherited a substantial amount of money, that they can live off the interest. And what we mean by that is they can take out a regular payment which doesn't dip into the sum of money, it is just that payment is the same as the interest. Despite being fairly common and also despite being relatively easy to understand, a lot of people make mistakes in their exams because they don't remember what a perpetuity is and how it works. So make sure you're not one of those people, so you'll learn what a perpetuity is and how they work. Before we go any further, it's important that we know what a perpetuity is. So we've already seen that scholarships and grants are examples of perpetuities. So a perpetuity is an investment that provides a series of regular payments that go on theoretically forever. The value of the investment never changes. An interest-only loan is similar to a perpetuity because we're only paying off the interest, so nothing is being paid off the amount borrowed, and the principal will need to be paid back right at the end. So the payments that you're making are only the interest payments. The principal is not changing. The annuity, or the regular payment, which we call Q, is exactly the same as the interest earned. So remembering what a perpetuity was, a perpetuity is an investment that never runs out. What it is that it's paying out some money, but the money that it's paying out is actually the same value as the interest it's gaining in its investment. The main crux of why perpetuities work is that the interest that's earned by the investment is identical to the payments that are paid out, so the principal value never ever changes. Because any interest that's earned is actually paid out at the same time, any future value is exactly the same as the amount that was originally invested, so the future value is the same as the principal or the present value. And because the investment never runs out, the principal value doesn't ever change, time is not a factor in perpetuities. As time isn't a factor, and as the principal doesn't ever change, the perpetuity formula is based on the simple interest formula, where Q is the payments made, which is also the interest, R is the interest rate, and it's very important that it's per time period, and P is the amount of the investment, but it's also the future value. So to calculate the payments out, which is the interest, we do P times the interest rate divided by 100. And these can be arranged to work out P. So P is 100 times Q, all divided by R, the interest rate, and then R is 100 times Q divided by P. And you can see that they're very similar to the simple interest formulas, except there is no T, because time isn't a factor. You can also use this formula in your E-activity. In your E-activities you have an option of perpetuities formula. One important thing to know is that we can only use this formula if the payment's out and the interest is added at the same regular intervals, so that means over the same time period. So what I mean is that if payments are paid monthly and interest is added monthly, that's okay. If payments are made weekly and interest is added weekly, that's fine too. But if the payments are paid out fortnightly but interest is only calculated monthly, we are not able to use the formula. And in that case, we'll have to use a TVM solver on our calculators. So we can actually use our TVM solver to make different calculations with perpetuities. And what's really important is we can use it when the interest is calculated at different time periods to the payments being made. So we can use a TVM solver when we can't use the formula. When using the TVM solver, it doesn't matter what number we put in for n, because remember, time doesn't matter. So we can put any number in here. I often put 1 in. The next thing we need is I. I is the interest rate per annum. Note this is different to when we use the perpetuity formula, where interest rate is the interest rate per time period. Here it is always the interest rate per annum. The PV stands for the present value of the investment, or the original value, and FV stands for the future value of the investment. And remember, they are both going to be the same because it never changes. One is going to be positive, one is going to be negative, but that's the only difference. I generally put that PV is negative because that's what you're investing, and then FV is positive because that's what you're getting back, but it doesn't matter either way. PMT just stands for the regular payments made or the instalment paid. Remember, that is the same as the interest, and that can be positive or negative depending on what you've put your signs in as PV and FV. And lastly, PY stands for the number of payments out per year, and CY stands for the number of times interest is calculated or compounded per year. And remember that they can be different. And if they are different, we must use the TVM solver. We cannot use the perpetuity formula. And finally, the key point when we're using the TVM solver is we cannot use this to find the amount required to invest, because if we did that, we don't know PV and we don't know FV. So there's two unknowns, so we can't work it out because there's two things the calculator needs to find. In this case, we have to go back to the perpetuity formula and use P equals 100Q over R.